Are you a technician who wants to set yourself apart? Then the Trusted Technician podcast is for you. I'm Derek Hoferter, coach and trainer at SBE, and on this podcast, we will have experienced HVAC coaches and trainers, as well as top-performing technicians, all sharing their tips and strategies to help you be more successful. Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Technician podcast. My guest today is Ty. Ty is in Phoenix, Arizona. He's the director of field operations at Patrick Riley and Isley. Ty, thanks for joining the podcast.
No problem. Thank you.
So just to get started, so everyone can kind of get to know you a little bit more, Ty, how did you get into the trades?
So I got in the trades about 20 years ago, almost accidentally. I was working a CNC job at the time and just wanted something that was not quite as mundane. And I'll date myself a little bit here. And I was looking in the newspaper in the classifieds and found a job at a place called Midwestern Mechanical that at the time was paying up to $12 an hour, which was a great wage back then, and for apprentices. And so I showed up there, had no idea what it was. Ended up starting my plumbing career. So became an apprentice there. I was there for about 5 years, and then I was all commercial and new construction plumbing at the time. And then went to residential after that. Was kind of sick of the drive times. They'd pack 5 or 6 of us in a truck and drive 2 hours to our job site, and then we'd be there for 10 hours and then drive back. So I wanted something that was more local, and then got into residential service plumbing at that time.
Yeah, so getting into it and then spending time in commercial, residential, what about it has made you stay with it? Like why stick with it as a career?
It's always different. It's not, you never get bored with it. There's always something new, as far as whether it's a different area that you're learning, whether it's water filtration or tankless or just changes in the industry, whether it's products. It's always new, and when you go to a home, no two of them are going to be alike. You gotta troubleshoot whatever it is. It's different every day. You're never going to get bored with it. As soon as you think you've got it all figured out, either the industry changes or you're up against something you've never seen before. So, the craftsmanship, when you're soldering, when you're standing back, you're looking at a multi-zone boilers, when you look back and see what you did, there's a pride that goes with it.
Yeah. And so you firsthand, you've been out in the field, you've been in the homes, living that life. And now you're more on the management side and you're supporting the guys that are out there, HVAC techs, plumbers. So what is it that, now looking at it with all your experience and then now your perspective, that you think makes, whether it's an HVAC tech or a plumber or electrician, like what are the things that make them successful now in the residential and going into homes?
It's really the people that care. You just got to remember that we're in a people industry and a service industry. And the most successful technicians that I've had are the ones that take a lot of time. They're the ones that frustrate dispatch because they might be at that job for 3-4 hours. They're the ones that come out with the biggest tickets, right? They spend the time, they listen to the customer, they hear their concerns, and they're hearing it through the customer's ears. And when you can do that, and you can sympathize and you can understand what's important to that customer, you're going to just be more successful in general. You're going to get great reviews. You're going to get great paychecks. It's just a lot better road to success than just clocking in and thinking of it as a job.
Yeah. Taking the time, I think, is kind of an act of showing that you care to a homeowner, right? But there still seems to be kind of like a divide in the industry of like companies that kind of understand that and companies that don't. I still feel like there's a lot that view it as a volume game. Like how many calls can I get these guys out to? How many calls can we get on the board? How many can we do in a day? And so I've even had technicians express frustration to me of, I would like to slow down. I don't feel like I'm allowed to do that. Do you still kind of see that divide happening?
Yeah. A lot of companies are that way. I'll have guys that I interview that, they're used to running 7-8 calls a day or more. And when I first went into residential service myself, that's kind of the world I was in, where, I'd do 3 water heaters in a day, or I'd run 6-7 calls and thought I was doing a good job, but it's a disservice to the customer when you're doing that, right? So the customer might have other concerns as well. You don't you don't uncover, right? So then the customer is mad the next day when their water heater goes out when you were just there the day before, or just, even today in the managerial role, I get more concerns from customers about the things that we didn't offer than trying to oversell a customer.
Mm. Well, yeah, that is quite a shift. And what you're saying too, one of the analogies I kind of use for that is like if you had something happen to your body and you had to go see a doctor, let's say you broke your arm, right? And you go in there, they bandage it up, take care of it, and then 2 weeks later you had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Like, did you guys not check my blood pressure? Like I was right there. That's kind of like the analogy that I have for it, right? But I think a lot of technicians are worried about maybe burdening the homeowner with too much at once or finding too many things. Is that kind of something that has to get overcome?
It is. It's understanding the correlation between service and sales. Yeah, I tell everybody, it's every meaningful conversation you'll ever have in life is a sale, right? So you're either trying to get somebody to understand what you're talking about or convince them that your sports team is better or whatever it is, you're selling them on a belief or a service or whatever that is. So if you can understand what a sale really is, it's not a bad word anymore, you know?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to help them with something.
Absolutely.
Um, in just kind of overall in the industry for residential in North America, I've seen numbers that the typical technician will do somewhere around maybe 2 to 300,000 a year. And if you kind of like divide that out and break that down, a $200 to $300 average ticket will kind of get you into that category. And I know technicians in your guys' operation, it's not unusual for a tech to do like 1 million a
Yeah.
year. So how does a tech go from 2 to 300,000 on average to 1 million? That's a big jump. What goes into $1 million of revenue?
It's just what I said, slowing down, spending time with the customer. My top performers in each of the trades, we have electrical now too, and my top performers in each of the trades are the guys that run the least calls. It's the guys that they'll have a green noted on their board that, no more than 2 calls a day or 3 calls a day, whatever that number is. Those are the guys that are most successful because they're taking the time to coming out with, they've got $2,000 to $3,000 average tickets because they're listening and caring, and that goes a long way. So, they got to overcome that distrust when you first knock on the door. The customers have that guard up. So if you can spend the time there to break that down and get the customer to understand that you do care and you're going to address their concerns or going to tell you what their concerns are.
Yeah, because for that typical average technician that I was talking about that does 2 to 300,000, we could kind of assume they are probably running more like 4, 5, 6 calls a day, or there's a lot of seasonality there, and part of that low revenue is just not being productive sometimes of the year. But I sometimes get this question of like, okay, I get it. I need to slow down. I need to take time, but I have no idea how to fill
Yeah.
that time. It only takes 15 minutes to do a maintenance, or only takes 20 minutes. Like what would I even do there for 2 hours? So what you mentioned spending time, but really what is the process that they're doing during that time to fill that much time?
Yeah, so our sales process with electrical and plumbing mimics our AC sales process as well. And a big part of that is that, with all the upfront contract, when you're talking to the customer, asking them questions, and you do that walkthrough, right? So with air conditioning, you go into the thermostat, you're walking through the rooms, or you're trying to get a history of what they've had done to the house or other service repairs or what's concerning to them. And it's the same with plumbing too, right? So start with that main shutoff, ask them, where's your main shutoff? Most people don't know, so let's find it together, right? So you go to the main shutoff. After that, let's look at the water heater. So as I do this maintenance, I understand where I'm going to need to focus on. And what you're going to do there as well is you're going to uncover some pain points, right? With, I know where my main shutoff is because I had to use it last year when my bathroom was flooding, right? Electrical, start with the panel, same walkthrough. But you're asking some questions, good questions, and the customer is going to be forced to open up to you, right? So that walkthrough alone should take 10, 15 minutes, right, if you're doing it right. And so then the rest of the process is going to be, well, remember when you told me this, so you're just
Hmm.
redirecting back to the initial conversation. But it opens up some good dialogue, some good history, maybe some pain points, right? But it's just quality time. It's not just spending the 2, 3 hours camped out in their living room. It's asking good questions and getting them to understand that you do care. right?
Yeah, that is funny because yeah, we imagine, I think especially for the homeowner too, like you mentioned the upfront contract. If there's not a discussion of, hey, I'm going to be thorough, I'm going to take my time, the homeowner might have some concerns of like, man, they've been in my basement for a while, they've been in my attic
Right.
for a while. What are they even doing? Are they like doing paperwork or TikTok videos or,
Yeah.
especially if all their interactions with AC guys or plumbers have been more like the 15 to 20 minutes. The homeowners might have some concern without that upfront contract and a discussion, right?
Well, yes, and it does throw the customer off and differentiates a little bit when you do take the time up front to ask them those questions because they are used to the traditional technician that's going to be there for 15 minutes, probably did little to nothing and then left and collected his paycheck, right? So if you could differentiate with that phone call, the upfront contract, find out what they have for time. There's nothing more frustrating than being halfway through your sales process and they have to jump on a Zoom or they have to go pick up their kids, right? So
Yeah.
that's super important.
Yeah. If I feel like if I had an air conditioner or a plumbing company, I'm listening to this as an owner of that company and we're in that mode where we're doing 7, 8, 9 calls a day, that seems like a really scary jump to intentionally run fewer calls.
Yeah.
Right? Like that seems like a scary thing to maybe like try to believe you on or trust you that you're telling me if I do the opposite of what I've always been told, it's going to end up in more revenue. Isn't that kind of a scary move?
It is, but the ideal amount of calls to run a day is one, right? If you go to that first one and you keep stacking that ticket and you're there all day and you're uncovering a lot of problems, a lot of concerns, you're on that call all day, you're going to make the money and you don't have any drive time and you're going to have a happy customer at the end of the day that's solved all their issues, all their concerns.
That's true. That's actually well said that the ideal number is one. Because I sometimes get that question asked, well, what is the ideal number
Yeah.
of calls?
Dispatch
One.
not dispatch might not agree with me, but
Yeah, normally this podcast is very HVAC heavy, but I am curious a little bit, let's discuss plumbing on here because I know there's plumbers that listen to it and kind of always have to put up with the HVAC talk. So I feel like especially with plumbers, the mentality is even more so than the AC guys of like almost like a sniper, right? Of like go to the problem, take care of it, and move and go on the way. So for an entire house, like what for a plumber, like what is the idea of a walkthrough for a plumber? Because AC, I think, is a little bit more logical because there's like the inside component, the outside component. Obviously, plumbing touches the house, but you can kind of give me an idea of what a plumbing walkthrough of a house might look like.
sure. Yeah, what we do is we start at the main shutoff. We'll ask the customer if they've ever had to use it. If they were to use it, how would they use it? From there, we would typically go to the water heater in the garage. I ask them about the water heater, how old it is, if they know how old it is, if they have filtration there. We're going to take a look at that too. From there, we're going to go typically from the garage, you're going to go into your laundry room. Ask them if they've ever had to use the shutoffs there before. You would go from there. Then we're going to touch on the bathrooms, see if there's any hose bibs outside and then you're going to end up at the kitchen, right? And you're going to use that same process when you're doing a maintenance call too, right? Because typically, if you're getting the customer involved, when you're doing a water heater flush and you get a bunch of scale out of there, you get the customer to come take a look at it. Were you aware of this, right? And then as you move through the home and you're uncovering things like scale, build up in the toilet tank, right? Once you get to the end of that process, you're going to be in their kitchen, and that's where you're going to test their water. We're going to try to figure out why you had all that scale, why you had that buildup, right? And then if everything goes right, you want to end up at that kitchen table. So,
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That's logical, right? It's kind of like the flow of water and the flow of the house.
yep.
And is there kind of a thought here with all of this too of it's one thing to go to someone's house who has a problem and fix the problem. But it's another thing to maybe help the homeowner understand why that problem happened
Mhm.
with some of the things you're talking about of like the scaling and the buildups of it's not just like band-aiding the problem for lack of a better term or fixing it, but understanding the whole house and why this occurred in your house.
Yeah, and that's super important. You touched on that because a lot of times the old school plumber, right, is just going to go and change that flapper and the problem is solved and they're getting out of there. But it's important to explain to the customer that flapper, the reason that it started leaking is because it got warped. There's too much chlorine in your water, right? And it eats up these seals. And that's the reason for it. It's going to happen again.
It's going to happen again.
Yeah, so let's get to the root of the problem, right? And make sure that, this isn't going to happen again. And while we're at it, let's look at your other toilet, right? Or do you have any leaky faucets, right? Because it's going to cause the same thing.
Yeah, and maybe it's better to get ahead of it the next time if this previous time caused additional damage
Yep.
to the surrounding area of the house. That makes sense, and that tracks with like air conditioning visit too. Of the technician that just swaps out a capacitor and goes on to the next one is putting a new capacitor back into the same environment where the previous one failed, or swapping a fan motor back into the environment where the previous one failed versus figuring out like why it failed, right?
Yeah, and we use that approach a lot on like slab leaks, right? Or if you have a leak in a pipe, right? You get the same material through your house, it's the same age, right? And it's exposed to the same elements. So what are the chances of this being the only leak? So let's investigate, make sure that we're not going to seal this up and then add more pressure to your system. It's going to burst somewhere else. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned a maintenance visit, a plumbing maintenance visit. Those are, I think, just overall much more common in air conditioning. Because again, with air conditioning, some of it too is just there's demand seasons and not demand season versus plumbing. It really isn't weather oriented, changes in that. So I feel like maintenance on the plumbing side isn't so common.
Right.
So, and is part of that too, just like as homeowners, maybe they've never really thought to have like a plumbing type of maintenance for combined with like plumbers not really talking
Yeah.
about the benefits of doing maintenance.
Yeah, and we do a good job of explaining to the customer the reasons for it, especially with the water heater. We do the water heater flush, but we also on every visit we check the anode rods, explain to the customer that it's a sacrificial part that's going to go bad and it's supposed to go bad, but you're supposed to replace it to keep the longevity of that water heater. We will check the elements as well. It's a customer's usually surprised once you pull that plate and they see how rusted those elements are sometimes. And if they're not, a lot of times we'll pull the element and we have an inspection camera we'll put in there to see the inside of
Mm,
the water heater, see if it's rusted, see what the condition is. And customers are usually very welcoming to that because they understand that the water heater is expensive and they don't want that thing bursting and then they have a restoration bill, for the sheetrock. But yes, it's not as common as air conditioning, but like I said, once we explain to the customers the reason for the maintenance visit, they understand that, yeah, they should get that annually.
yeah, I know. I think it's great, especially as a homeowner. I've started to realize the benefits of that as well. And until in the last few years, when I started to understand plumbing more, it wasn't on my radar either. So
Right. And
I
then
understand.
pressure is another thing that we check too, because especially in the Phoenix area, there's a lot of, most of your fixtures are only rated for 80 psi. Code is 80 psi max, and there's several homes in the valley here that are over 100 psi. Customers aren't aware of it, so it's another thing we do on the maintenance.
Okay, no, that makes a ton of sense. So, Ty, we just due to time, and I know you're busy and all that, we got to start wrapping this up. So, you've talked about a number of things, slowing down, being more thorough, having a process, seeing the whole house. But if someone's listening to this, whether they're a plumber or HVAC tech, it's really the same idea. What might be something that if they were to start somewhere with implementing, a change to try to be better, to try to improve their average ticket and improve their revenue, like where should they start?
I think it starts with really taking pride in your profession. You touched on it with your doctor analogy, and with doctors and dentists and chiropractors, none of those guys are scared to tell you what's wrong with your body when you go in there. For whatever reason, in the trades, we have this mentality that we're scared to bring this up to the homeowner for fear of them thinking I'm salesy, right?
Mm,
So my advice is just remember you're the professional, right? You're the one that they called to go over their home. If you find something that's wrong or that's warping or that's starting to go bad, remember that it's broke, right? If something needs replaced, it needs replaced. They're not plumbers. It's not going to come as easy for them to fix that as it is you. So bringing it up, explaining it to them, you'd be surprised how many of those say yes or call back with a go ahead for the recommendation. So that'd be my biggest piece of advice. It's a old trade and we should be proud to be plumbers.
I really like that a lot. Yeah, to continue like the doctor analogy, if I went in for a physical and had blood work done and tests done, I would want to know everything. Like I would be very upset if you were picking and choosing what info
Absolutely.
to share with me.
Yeah, and pictures and videos go a long way too. If you find something, take a picture, show the customer, send it to the customer, right? The seeing is believing. Don't just tell them that something's wrong, explain it to them, show it to them. You don't have to be salesy, just care.
I love that. Ty, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you for listening to the Trusted Technician Podcast. If you would like to learn more about SBE, you can find us online at sbeodyssey.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a review. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.